Hey everybody. Zach, it's good to see you here. I'm having some trouble because I don't have the host tools and I don't know what's going on. So I hope everything is going to work well.
Okay, no worries.
So that's why I'm like not quite. I don't know why this happened to me one time before and it's super annoying because I lose all my power. I'm gonna leave and come back and see if I can resolve my problem.
All right, sounds good. Looks like I have the option to share right now. So,
Okay, great. Hold on one second and I'll come back. Oh my goodness. I think I got it. I got all my powers back. I got kicked off the I got signed out of the Zoom. I have my own Zoom account, and then of course I have the admin account for this, and I got kicked out of it. Blah blah blah. My technology didn't make me happy. Uh, all right, I think we're probably going to have a little bit of a different group today. I see Willie, I see Kim. Oh, Heather, I'm glad you're here from Rogue Food Unites. Um, so I think we can probably go ahead and get started anytime, Zach.
Okay.
So, and I think if we can start out with some introductions from you folks, and folks will probably continue to trickle in.
Yeah, sounds great. So real quick, I'll pull up my slides. I have a little bit of an introduction slide there to share with everybody. Let me get it prepped so it makes sense. Go. Let's see. Right window. That's the one. There we go. All right. So let's see. Can everybody see my presentation
Yes.
screen? Okay, great. Um, so my name is Zach Weigand. I'm the food pilot plant manager here at Oregon State University Department of Food Science and Technology. And I've brought along with me my colleague Jessica Just, who's online, and we're here to kind of go over pilot scale manufacturing. We're going to take kind of two approaches here. One, try to get you introduced to pilot scale manufacturing if you're not familiar and get an understanding of what it is and how it works, things like that. And then we'll talk a little bit about our pilot manufacturing facilities here at OSU and kind of lean on the food and beverage side of what we do heavily here. But I really appreciate you having me here, and I'm looking forward to answering a bunch of questions. We'll have plenty of time, I think, for questions at the end, and so we can kind of jump into it. So here's me and Jessica. So again, my title is Pilot Plant Manager, and then Jessica is our Director of Industry Services. And Jessica, do you want to do a little introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I met some of you, Kim, Willie. We've talked on the phone, so it's good to see some names I recognize. I'm in a fairly newly created role within the food science department at Oregon State, and that's basically organizing and promoting the services that we have that are for industry. So Zach's going to talk about one of those, which is pilot manufacturing, but for the record, we also have some food safety things that we do, sensory consumer science, some flavor analysis, and quality shelf life, that kind of stuff. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to hit me up during this conversation or later on. But yeah, thanks, Zach.
Jessica,
Yeah.
is that last lineup of sensory testing and food science, is that work that's happening out of the Food Innovation Center? Or is
Yes.
okay.
Well, yeah, some of it. The sensory happens at the Food Innovation Center and on campus in Corvallis. Um, and it's a good point. There's three locations within the food science department, sort of broad umbrella. That's the Food Innovation Center in Portland, the main campus in Corvallis, and also the Astoria Seafood Lab.
No, okay.
And so I'm mostly involved with campus, but I'm actually in the FIC right now. I'm calling you from the Food Innovation Center. So I do work with all the entities to broadly promote all the things that we do. So
Yeah. I think this group has the most familiarity with the Food Innovation Center. We've had Sarah Masoni come on and talk a couple of times.
Perfect.
We've also sent the Food Innovation Center out to, I think, 3 or 4 of the hubs now, and done a
Oh,
product development workshop. So we're fairly familiar with that part of it, but
great.
the pilot plant is definitely new to this group, and the capabilities and sort of why you might go one direction, why you might work with one entity or another is very new to the scope.
Great. Good point. Thank you.
All
All
right,
right.
so that's us. It was kind of based on a conversation I had with Sydney previously. I thought it would be good to kind of include some of these questions, try to answer them for you in terms of what is a pilot facility, because it sounds like not very many people have experience with them, and usually when we meet new people that are entering the food industry or are just learning about things in the food manufacturing world, uh, the term pilot plant is a pretty foreign term, and nobody really understands what it means because some people think airplanes and some people occasionally think boats, but really what we're doing here is piloting and starting something new or trying something at a different scale, manufacturing scale. And we'll talk a little bit about why it exists and what needs we're meeting in the role of a pilot facility, and then try to understand what costs can be when it comes to pilot manufacturing, and then plenty of time for questions. And in there, we'll talk about our processing and capabilities and things as well. So let's go on this journey. Feel free, Sydney, if you have any clarification points you want to bring up while we're going through this, you're more than welcome to. Seems like the group's pretty tight knit and informal, and I'm happy to treat it that way. I don't need it to be a super formal presentation or anything like that. So, but we'll have like dedicated time for questions at the end too. So, all right. One thing when we're talking about pilot manufacturing, and the way I like to describe this to kind of simplify it is there's kind of three stages of bringing a food product to market. And you may have learned some of this from Sarah Massoni. She works on the product development side, which is kind of what we consider bench topping or in the commercial kitchen kind of setting. And maybe some people are working their food companies out of commercial kitchens, and they're using a lot of food service equipment and things like that that are common in commercial kitchens to batch things, and maybe stepping up a little bit into bigger processing. But you're kind of limited to small scale batch production, and you're kind of the fledgling stages. And then the next kind of step that we typically see is pilot manufacturing. This is where you're translating from those smaller scale productions up to what you would start to approximate at manufacturing. And so we're doing kind of continuous or semi-continuous production, much larger batches than you may be able to accomplish at a commercial kitchen. And using some of the typical equipment you would see when you went to full production, like at a big manufacturing facility. And then when you get to manufacturing, when you're working with like a larger co-packer for your product or something like that, you're in a facility that's heavily equipped for very specific types of processing and has lots of efficiencies and economies of scale in production, and it's a well-oiled machine, and it's big. And that's kind of if you want to make big batches and make them affordable and have a good price point, that's where you're transitioning to manufacturing. So we're in the middle there. We're that pilot scale, and this is just a quick photo I took of our facility yesterday, I think. But very recently remodeled. Our building is built in the 1950s, and it had been mildly updated incrementally over the years, but we finally were able to secure some funding from the USDA, the Resilient Food Systems Initiative program, to really update our infrastructure so we can expand our pilot plant to modern needs and types of products we want to see and support in the industry, and particularly in Oregon agriculture and the Pacific Northwest. So it's pretty shiny and new now. Got lots of stainless steel. It is very common in these food manufacturing facilities just due to the food safety requirements and things like that. So we're actually a licensed food processing facility, licensed by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And then we're capable of getting any of the kind of certifications you might see when you end up in the retail market if you're selling to a grocery store that has those tighter requirements for food safety or third-party audits and things like that. We're not actively engaged in any of those third-party audit schemes, but currently we're capable of doing that in our facility and operating it like a food manufacturing facility. Another kind of big part of the updates to our facility is we had announced it recently that we're opening what's called the OSU Beverage Center. And that is essentially it's partly a physical place, but it's also kind of meant to be collective effort across all kind of products that are liquid or beverage like. Because again, we have multiple pilot facilities here. This is, I'm really talking about the food processing pilot facility, and what's in this photo. But we also operate a pilot winery, a pilot dairy, and then a pilot seafood plant up in Astoria. And the Food Innovation Center, which some of you may have spent some time at, there's a small pilot-like facility out there. But we're kind of in a little bit different category here when we operate a lot of larger equipment. So, but the beverage center that we've announced, we've added a lot of capabilities solely around beverage production, and the kind of a goal to be able to produce 1,000 units of retail sellable or retail quality canned or bottled product that can go out to market or for sale samples and things like that. And so a lot of the equipment and expertise we have here around beverages, and that's one of the main areas we focus on. That being said, we do a lot of fruit and vegetable processing, sauce manufacturing, dehydration, particle reduction, individual quick frozen, you name it. If we don't have the equipment in-house, we can rent it, bring it in, and run it, and operate industrial machinery and things like that for production. So that's kind of one of the niches that pilot scale has. And to kind of carry on with that, like why does it exist? It's kind of the perfect place to transition from either small to large or large to small. And to explain that a little bit more, I like to use the example of, say, you've been making your 10-gallon batch of barbecue sauce for the last few years and bottling it maybe in a commercial kitchen or at home, depending on what your licensure and your process is. When you maybe want to transition and go up to a much larger manufacturing world, things change rapidly. Your needs and the equipment and how you handle things. And the examples I love to use are, say you're making that barbecue sauce and you're opening number 10 cans of tomato paste, and then you're also cutting up limes and you're squeezing them and making juice. Well, when we scale up to like the 1,000 gallons or 10,000 gallon batch, we don't open number 10 cans. It's too much of an inefficiency. There's issues worrying about foreign material from opening the metal cans. So usually you'd bring in what's called like a super sack or a 2,000 pound or 1,500 pound block of tomato paste, or either coming in 55-gallon fiber drums or something like that. And how to get that into the mixing tanks is always a problem. You have to have pumps that will actually pump tomato paste. And the same thing goes with limes. If you need 40 gallons of lime juice, you're typically not going to be squeezing it. You're going to potentially look for a supplier that makes that lime juice at scale, and you can buy frozen buckets of it or pasteurized pails of it. But then you realize that that's a little bit different than those fresh squeezed limes that you had in there. It doesn't add the same flavor. So then you might need to work with a flavor company that has a lime oil that matches kind of that natural fresh feeling. So usually when you're transitioning, there's a lot of these little things that maybe on the small side, when you're transitioning to large, you haven't figured out those little details. And that's where pilot manufacturing really sets things apart and gets you set up for manufacturing. That's heavily a part of what I do. I'm considered a process developer. So I can take those small recipes and I can look at them as an industrial transition, so you can actually turn them into a larger scale production. And then we have the facilities to make that happen: the equipment, the pumps, the handling equipment, the cleaning materials, how to deal with moving all those things. And that's kind of the idea. The other angle to this is, say, if somebody at a large food company is making something, but they want to make a new product or a change, it's hard for them to do that. They're like the example of food manufacturing. You're kind of specialized and you're tied into something. If you want to make a change, you don't necessarily want to run a 10,000 pound batch just to try it out. It might cost too much money to throw away. So you can look at pilot manufacturing. You can do a smaller version. So we typically have a lot of industrial equipment that might match a larger scale manufacturer. And so we can use that equipment to approximate their production process for, say, a trial. And kind of what leads into that is, ultimately, we're very, very dynamic and flexible in manufacturing. We can bring in equipment. We can experiment. We can take equipment to their limits. We can try weird ingredients, and it's on a scale that's not typically breaking the bank in terms of like a trial, things like that. So it's worth it to do it at that scale and understand how it would behave. So we're there as kind of a resource on both sides to larger industries trying to transition or make a new product or test something out. But then also supporting either startups or small businesses that are kind of working in smaller, non-continuous production or not haven't made that jump yet, and helping them on to larger scale production. And ultimately, a lot of the work that we do from the perspective of small food companies or small food producers is we can do that process development and translate it to a manufacturing process. And then that's actually really well set up to hand off to a co-manufacturer that maybe specializes in something, say like a sauce manufacturer. We can give them an understanding of the suppliers that would be needed and the types of ingredients and stabilizers or whatever you may be needing, and hand that essentially to a co-manufacturer. It makes it a lot easier transition coming from a small pilot facility than straight from like small production to a co-manufacturer. And sometimes that fills a need there. So
Zach,
those are some of the reasons. Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. There's a few questions in the chat, and I think this would be a good place to address
Sure.
at least one of those. Sydney asked, is the recipe development included in the facility costs? Do you want to tackle that? You want me to?
I go right ahead, Jessica.
Okay. So we're really positioned once you have your recipe or your formula that you would bring it to us. So starting with someplace like the Food Innovation Center for your product development, we're kind of, I mean, Zach has the capability to do bench work there, no problem, but it's not necessarily our sweet spot. And that's what the FIC is really set up to do. And so how we price things is a little bit, if you've ever priced things out through the FIC, basically we bill in a facility day. We try to estimate the number of days or half days we think it's going to be in the facility, and then hours of labor. So I think that that's what Zach's talking about, a process development. So ideally you would come with your formula in place, and there's always going to be changes that need to be made during scale up, and that's the kind of work that Zach could help out with. So not just the equipment and producing it and seeing what it's like, but also making the tweaks along the way that would be necessary. So does that answer your question?
I think so. So I show up, I've bench topped my recipe. I'm in a good spot there. I'm getting close to outgrowing that production method. So I go to the pilot plant and I say, I, need to scale this recipe, which is going to involve a bunch of different changes potentially because we're going into different equipment. And so that's where I would go. I would go to the pilot plant to scale a bench-topped recipe that's proven out and get it into, do a run on this equipment and test it that way without spending a trillion dollars. It'll be $1 jillion, but not a quadrillion dollars.
Exactly.
So that I can then potentially reach into larger regions or get into distribution or whatever my next step is on my trajectory. Okay.
That's right. That's exactly.
Yeah, so ultimately we're meant to work in concert. And the idea here is we've got the Food Innovation Center that can help with concept development and bench topping and getting a food product developed. And then it could be potentially moved to the pilot facility where we do some of the process development, making sure it's ready for manufacturing, but then can do trial runs to make 1,000 units or something like that. So somebody has those products in hand, processed in a licensed food processing facility that they could take to potential investors or samples in markets and test markets and things like that, before you end up either staying with that small production, or maybe you just need that first purchase order that's for the right quantity that can justify moving on to manufacturing, where you have a much higher minimum order quantity from a co-manufacturer or something like that.
Thank you.
You bet. So kind of carry on with that. How our pilot facilities been kind of meeting industry needs? I'm always open to hearing what other parts of the industry people need. So I'm happy to be here with this group as well. But what we've currently seen is the biggest thing for actual hitting the manufacturing stride is that folks who are starting these food companies really need to lower minimum order quantities to make it viable. And going to some of these companies and they maybe have a 15,000 unit minimum or a 30,000 unit minimum, depending on what it is, or 1,000 pounds minimum, something like that. It can prevent a lot of people with products, small good products, from entering the manufacturing market, and getting into the market so people can get those products and they can be produced. So that's kind of why we're here, is trying to be able to meet those needs of smaller minimum order quantities. And then also being, again, like I've said before, we're flexible. We can pretty much set up any kind of food processing known to man in our plant. And we have a lot of expertise amongst all of our staff here and faculty, and we can set up just about any kind of production you can think of. Same thing goes for flexibility. If we need to make 100 units instead of 1,000 units, we can do that. And if we need to make 5,000, we can also do that too. And the nice thing is the kind of manufacturing we do here is meant to be representative of industrial manufacturing, and less closer to that than, say, something that's done kind of in a food service level or something like that. So we can approximate what the changes in process will be. So I think the thing that everybody always wants to know is, how much does it cost? And I can give you kind of the cliff notes here, and I think Jessica can add quite a bit about this, because Jessica works heavily on statements of work and quotes for people when they come to us looking for a process. And my favorite answer, and I know it's everybody's favorite answer when you ask about what it costs, is it depends. And that depends a lot on what kind of product you're making. And some of the needs you might have. So the pilot scale, generally, it's a lot of people are usually surprised when we say we're going to make 1,000 units, and they see the cost. But we're actively working on trying to make it affordable or reasonable for the type of work that we're doing. There's usually, in the pilot world, there's a lot of development time that happens, and we're not working at economies of scale. And that's where you see a lot of the savings in unit costs that you're getting and things like that. But in the pilot scale, there's a lot of setup and development work that goes into making the product. It's kind of that fledgling portion. But once you transition to making a lot more units, usually the cost per unit goes down. But again, that's kind of what part of the cost is we're very flexible in the pilot manufacturing world, and have a lot of broad expertise and kind of set everybody up for success. But those are kind of the high points. And now I'll let Jessica talk a little bit more about some of the typical costs you might see for projects that we've had, and give you kind of an idea.
Yeah. So, to be transparent, we're still in early days. So there's Weigund Hall Food and Beverage Pilot Plant in particular, the one we are looking at a picture of, has been working with industry since its inception. So that's not new. What is new for us is a more focused effort for making an outreach to industry and to get some of these projects. So we're early days of pricing them out, but on average, and it's funny because, like Zach says, when you look at this on a per unit basis, it's garbage. I think we did a barbecue sauce. We quoted out a barbecue sauce project recently, and it was like $34 a bottle, right? So we are probably not, but that includes process authority work, that includes ingredients, and we are not the long-term home for your co-manufacturing needs. We are just there to fill that gap. It's probably more appropriate not to look at us on a per bottle basis, but on a project basis. So again, depending on I'll tell you, we charge, the facility fee is $900 a day plus labor. And it's the labor that is a real variable. But our projects have been averaging, even, whether it's IQF, which there was a question about that, or barbecue sauce, or freeze-dried popcorn, or interesting alcoholic beverages that may or may not include coffee. It looks like oat milk. It looks like on average, it's about $3,300 a day is what all those quotes are for, and that doesn't include like the cost of the materials. So just to give you a sense, I'm very happy to keep talking about that or your experience because some of you run manufacturing, right, in your own plants there. I'd be happy to trade notes and hear what your experience is or what you're hearing from other folks too. But that's usually where we are.
Jessica, I would say our folks are mostly working with at micro scale, or most of them are running food hubs that are in interaction with folks who are working at micro scale. But some of those folks are either looking to scale or have participated in things like going to some of the big trade shows, and they get themselves in a how am I going to produce all of these samples kind of
Yeah.
story. So I think one question I have is if there was a small entrepreneur that was going to a trade show that wanted to do a run at pilot scale as opposed to their typical bench scale, because they're hoping to get picked up by someone else, that pilot scale, sorry, doing a run through the pilot plant is going to have them positioned for this is actually how my product would turn out when it is going through co-man, as opposed to some poor soul trying to make all of their samples in their benchtop process. And then in reality, their product's somewhat different because it's having to go through different manufacturing processes, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And even between our scale and the next co-manufacturer, there will also be differences. I mean, you cannot believe the impact specific pieces of equipment make on recipes. But we're hopefully narrowing that gap. So there's going to be less of a change, right,
Mm-hmm.
between what we're doing and the ultimate co-man. But yeah, that's the goal.
Thank you. That's something to think about. We've done several programs where we sponsored folks to go to these events, and maybe we should be thinking about how they're producing their samples for those events.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Zach and I are also, I mean, we are still the university and we like chatting to people about their food processes. So I think Zach and I, at least at this stage, we're always up for a chat to kind of think through. Because I think I mean, without knowing what the products are, I think some products translate just fine.
Mm-hmm.
There's not like a ton of change. Um, Other products, like I worked briefly. My sister is also a food scientist. She works at Baxter's, what used to be the old Truett Brothers, which is low acid packaged food, retorts. And you just can't, it's really difficult to mimic the impact of what industrial retorts do to a product without going through a retort. So that's a product that actually changes a lot. So it's very dependent on the product type. But Zach and I are happy to give free advice, I think, when it comes to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's time for questions, and I think there's several still in the chat, but we can feel free to keep adding them, and I'm happy to field them with Jessica or whoever's available. So just me and Jessica.
Yeah,
But
Zach, let's go back to Sydney's original question. And then she got a couple likes on that about the IQF
yeah,
capabilities.
yeah. So we maintain a few different options for what's IQF being individually quick frozen. So we've done a lot of historical work doing fruits and vegetables as IQF here, mostly for breeding programs and things like that. So we do have some equipment that is considered equivalent to the industrial individual quick frozen tunnels and things like that. In particular, I have a small liquid nitrogen injected tray freezer, so it's relatively small, but it can run continuously. We can do about 4 full-size sheet pans of product at a time. And then we have all the packaging capabilities to package in film and things like that of IQF product. We also have quite a few walk-in blast freezers that we can use. They're a little bit lower temperature, or a little bit higher temperature than my liquid nitrogen blast freezer. And we've got some potential in the future to add a liquid nitrogen bath conveyor feed freezer. So there's a few different ways you can do individually quick frozen, and we can do a couple of them. So we can't handle like a huge quantity for trials, but we could potentially do 1,000 units of something IQF over the course of a few days if we needed to. So we do maintain IQF capabilities.
I think IQF is sort of a background ongoing interest within this group because they work largely with small scale farmers and they end up with this glut situation every year. Can we save this crop and find some way to market it as a frozen, which is why that question came up.
Yeah.
Maybe doesn't sound exactly like you're the right resource to resolve that issue because
No.
it's an on the moment kind of thing. So any feedback you have on how we might solve that issue as a
Oh yeah.
group, we
It's,
would we would be happy to take.
I have 110% heard that same problem coming from most small and medium-sized farmers out in the
Yeah.
area dealing with excess crop. And since, especially here in the Willamette Valley, the decline in agricultural cooperatives and processing
Mm-hmm.
plants and things like that's making it really, really challenging. And very often I get requests to see if I could IQF process somebody's 10,000 pounds of beans that they had harvested, and unfortunately, I can't quite handle that much volume in my plant.
Okay.
But we can do kind of smaller trials for people if they just need like a couple, like 1,004 ounce packs or something like that. Those are the kinds of projects we would potentially be able to take on and help with. But we can't take a truckload of green beans or something like that, or broccoli or cauliflower. We can take a couple hundred flats of berries and process those. We have kind of bigger processing equipment for fruits than we do for
Mm-hmm.
vegetables right now. But so we can process fruits into juices or jams or purees and things like that pretty effectively. But yeah, the IQF is one of those things that is left for the larger stuff is left best to like National Frozen and what's left of Norpac and some of those processors, but most of that's moved up to Eastern Washington. So,
Okay.
but yeah,
Well, hope springs. Hope springs.
I always okay, yeah,
Cindy, you also asked here if we have relationships with co-packers. Uh, we're
we know.
building out our list. Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we know of some co-packers, but like Jessica's starting to say, is we're continuing to build out our list and find out who's taking on what kind of work, because that plays really well into folks that we can hand off clients to, or potential call collaboration or things like that, or if something's too small for one of those co-packers, they can work with us and things like that. So we're building that list. It's not
But
huge yet, but
but it's hard to, I mean, for those of you who've talked to me in the past, you know that like co-packing has been a head scratcher for me for like the last 3 years. It's also hard because there's just not that many co-packers. I would say not even in the Pacific Northwest, but even on the West Coast, relatively
Mm-hmm.
speaking. So yeah, it turns out that co-packing is hard. I mean, it's hard. It's hard on both sides. It's hard for co-packers to make money because you have to make things at scale in order to make any money, which means your processes are fairly inflexible, which makes it difficult for those needing co-packing services because you need smaller MOQs and you need different processes. And it's troublesome. But through this, because I mean, basically, we've only opened up intake maybe the last for these things, Zach, like I don't know, 4 or 5 months. And I suspect if we chatted next year, Sydney, that we're going to have a much longer list of folks that we can point
That's
people to. But
I'm hopeful of that. I think that the co-packing is another one of those things. We've done a lot of work as a group together to try and understand it, but it remains essentially a black box because there's sort of who's doing co-packing changes all the
yeah,
time. What they're willing to do changes all the time. And folks go
yeah,
in and out of business because the business is really hard
right.
or because they stop, somebody's doing some minor co-packing of a product that's similar to their actual product that they're doing and they're just filling their benchtop kitchen So it's kind of a mess. So knowing where the resources are is
Yeah.
huge. So I'm hopeful that you guys can hold that resource at some point.
We'll see. And I know the ODA, I mean, they have their co-packing list, but it
Mhm.
hasn't been updated for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah,
And yeah,
it's out of date for
yes,
sure.
it's out of date. Yeah. Um, so stay tuned. And then Darlene, hey, Darlene, you asked if we have a list of equipment and somebody put in the link. So yes, both those things are true. It is my homework assignment after I get back from the fancy food show this weekend, um, to get our website more up to date. Our website is a work in progress right now, but we will absolutely work on getting a more detailed list of our capabilities online. Because Darlene, you're right. Like sometimes it comes down to the specific piece of equipment. Um, but you can ask us right now if you're looking for anything, and that's probably the easiest way to figure out is just to give Zach, one of us, a call, and we can walk through it. So Abigail, you said, oh, working with institutions that are operating during the winter. Yeah, that's also a problem. Diana Foods, I forget the new parent company name. They do operate all year. They make powders, basically. That's more of an ingredient supplier, and I know they're one of the few around here that does continue to operate during the winter. But all right,
And then
Maggie.
Jessica, oh, sorry, we have a raised hand from Willie as well.
Oh, hey, Willie. This is the
Hey,
first.
Willie.
We're the first time we're meeting. We've talked on the phone, so it's good to see
I,
you.
I know, and I appreciate seeing you again, Zach. I've seen your
Yeah.
name around, but I don't think we've met personally. I'm not sure. But my question, well, first, Jessica, you said you're going to an upcoming food conference or such in the next few
Yeah,
days or so?
it's the fancy food
Right.
show. Yeah.
Where's it at?
New York City. I'm going with the FIC. I'm going with Sarah Masone, actually. It's
Okay.
the first, I've never been to
Yeah,
that show,
never
so it's
mind.
my first time. Yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask you, I was going to you need somebody to carry your suitcases, okay?
Yes. Come
Uh,
along.
well,
I'll
yeah, you're
carry
gonna
your
give me a
suitcase.
ticket, but no, it's good seeing you guys, especially you, Jessica. My question is more surrounding the capacity because I'm familiar with what you guys are doing at Oregon State University. That is right, Oregon State, because I get the Ducks. Don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me. I
You
get the
got it right.
Ducks, I get the Beavers mixed up in names. Okay. Uh, I've been out there. I've talked to a number of folks there, especially the person in charge. One day I spent some time there. So I've seen your facility. Okay, very impressive. My question is, do you guys have the capacity, at least at this point, to do any extraction or extracting and or either centrifuging of things like that?
Yes. So we have quite a bit of equipment we can do different types of extractions here. Liquid extractions, so we can do like solvent-based liquid extractions. We have supercritical CO2 extraction equipment as well. We have one centrifuge right now, but we'll probably be adding another one that can be used for a few more uses.
Okay.
So yeah, we have them scaled for beverage production and all kinds of pumps and mixing vessels and things like that.
Okay. All right. Well, my challenge has been even before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, I was using a particular ingredient. It was sweet potato concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not puree, not juice, but concentrate because the components, or at least the composition of it, it was some of the closest, or one of the closest ingredients I found to honey. Okay, well, Peru clearly is not close to that concentration
Yep.
of honey. And so that's what I'm looking and been looking at. I talked to Sherry Cole, I talked to Eric, and we've kind of entertained it a while ago, but now, especially since you guys are kind of doing what you're doing, I want to begin at least have that conversation on what are the possibilities. Of course, I'd have to find a sweet potato distributor or provider, but that's what I'm looking at.
So you're looking at trying to manufacture a sweet potato concentrate?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at for personal use
Okay.
because I use it in my product. I used it in my product, and then right around the time when the pandemic
Got it. Okay.
concluded, the university, North Carolina, and the company that they were in partners with, kind of like the university you guys are doing, they closed down. So I haven't found any product that is consistent with what I'm looking for because it has to be staying the honey. And one thing about it is it's a very neutral tasting concentrate. It's you can't even taste per se the sweet potato, but it gives the consistency of honey.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, that's what I'm wondering if you guys have the capacity to do something like that, or at least what I need to do to begin to have the comment the next 6 months to a year. What do I need, or what do we need to do to put that whole pipeline into motion?
Yeah, sure. Happy to have those conversations with you.
Oops.
Figure out what that product was like, and kind of what your needs are, and we can happy to schedule time to chat about that. That's why we're here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All it takes
Okay.
is
Well,
time and
yeah.
money, really.
Yep.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just looking at sorry,
Okay.
Willie, just looking at some other questions in the chat. There looks like something about around a retort. Darlene, I'm not surprised to see you jumping in there too. I know you've been looking for retort stuff. So we do have a retort. Zach can speak more about it. It's currently, we need to get it running. We need to recommission it. We did our renovation, and so it's not going yet. But we're pretty flexible with it, right, Zach? It's just going to be the throughput is going to be very
Yeah.
low.
We have a very flexible retort that can do just about any kind of retorting. We can do air overpressure for pouches, which is required for things like pouches or glass jars. We can do 2 or 3 piece steel cans, any size. It's very flexible, but it's the tricky thing is it's a relatively small batch size. I mean, we're talking of typical like three 310 cans like this. We can do maybe 200 at a time in it. That's it. And that's just under still retort. Pouches, it would be less because they have to be stacked and spaced different. There's lots of different requirements. So it kind of just depends on the pack size. And then there's a lot of ancillary type testing and things like that we would have to do depending on the product pack size and product density and things like that. So, but
Yeah.
we have flexible capability, just not high throughput.
Yeah. Darlene?
A question about the retort specifically. So, say we wanted to test our product at the pilot plant to get our process authority letter and the super small batch size. How much of a difference in the product end result would it be between the retort you have versus what's available at like the other canneries around Oregon or the other retort manufacturers' equipment? Because it sounds like, if we get our formula dialed for that machine, we might still have to do a step like try it again at whatever co-man we go to later.
That's right. So, Darlene, the process authority letter is retort and facility specific. So if you were to do it at ours, we'd have to do, this is why it's like not really practical to do true co-manufacturing with our retort. Our retort's going to be more like process development work, because then you could see the impact of a real retort process on your product, but you wouldn't sell it. It would just be like we would be tasting it there, right? That you would have a sense of that, because you would have to basically, and a low acid process authority, there's hardly any of them. I think there's like one guy, and it's a guy on the West Coast, and it's like 3 to 4. You probably know, darling. You probably talked to him, but it's like $3,000 to $4,000 per test, and that's so there's thermal distribution, and there's two. There's one of the product. I should know this. The heat penetration, that would be the product itself, and then you need to have the retort, a thermal distribution, so you have the retort. So it's they're not trans those. It's not transferable to other. All that work isn't transferable to other retorts. The product quality might be transferable, but all the other work. I don't know if that, I hope that answered your question. It's
Yeah,
tough.
I think that that does answer my question, but still leaves me stuck because what I'm trying to figure out is like, if is there a small way to go from bench top to a little bit bigger of a scale before the MOQs of a co-manufacturer, which are just too high for us.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like we can't use the pilot plant to even do small batch runs. It sounds like it's not going to be cost effective anyway.
Yeah. I mean,
Not really.
you could, but you're right. It would be $50,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would not be cost effective.
Yeah.
That's true. And there are smaller, I mean, there's hardly any retort operators in the country. On the pouch side, there's 4 manufacturers probably in the whole country. So it's 4 or 5, so unfortunately, that is what it is. There is a smaller guy in Oregon, but he has one client right now. So, and until that client goes away, which who knows when that's going to be, then he's not available. So yeah, it's a tough one. I don't have an answer for that one.
Tough. It's tough out there.
And then Cindy, you're saying you want to know what everybody wants to run through a retort. We've had a lot of low acid beverages, Zach, like the oat milk coffee one. That was, and then Zach, you have another colleague that has all kinds of retort projects, and we keep saying we don't have the retort running yet, but
Yep.
Basically, yeah, low acid shelf stable food.
So
Tracy,
is retort
sorry.
fancy for pressure cooked?
It is. Retort is a pressure cooker. That's right. Yeah. And that is a good segue into Tracy's question. Is there a good resource or glossary for food processing industry terms? Maybe, probably. I'm not.
That's more like you just spend enough time talking to Jessica and I, and then you'll just start to pick up the lingo. But
Let's see.
Question in there about industrial kitchen manufacturing equipment.
Yeah.
Relationships, not really. I have a lot of knowledge of who makes different types of equipment that we constantly are looking at. Do you have, this is to Zachary, do you have a specific type of equipment you're looking for? Or are you looking for like a particle reduction, like chopping things up or making purees or anything like that?
Sorry if it's a bit noisy in here, but freeze drying equipment, and kind of we're making freeze dried meals, and we're going to be starting a separate facility on a bigger scale that we currently have.
Yeah.
So kind of everything. And
Sure.
maybe we could just chat offline then.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. You fill out a survey here. There's the QR code. You can contact us, and I'll make sure that Sydney passes along our email addresses as well. And I'm happy to talk to you about some of those specifics and things like that. Share what I do know.
Perfect. Thank you
Just
so
to
much.
jump in on the freeze drying topic, what's the volume capacity of your equipment?
Well, so we can usually when you talk about freeze dryers, you talk about how much water you can remove. That's the easiest way to actually deal with it. So we can remove about 20 liters of water from product. But generally speaking, I can put 9 full-size sheet pans in my freeze dryer that I have here, which is just a commercial harvest rate unit that we purchased to replace some really old freeze dryers. I have a small lab freeze dryer that's from the 1980s as well. But yeah, so like 9 sheet pans. You can't really have product that's much higher, taller than about 1 inch. Um, but we can fit. I fit maybe 45 pounds of product in there at a time, give or take, depending on how wet it is. Does that help? Okay. All
Other
right. Are there any other
questions?
questions? Yeah.
Looks like there's more. Any other questions from this group about the pilot plant?
And we're always available for tours.
Yeah.
Um, I've been
Anybody
trying
who
to
wants to stop by.
I've been trying to get Kim over to the pilot plant for, I don't know, at least 2 years. So you can tag along with Kim when she comes over, but we're very happy
I'm
to
sort of
host you.
kicking myself for not going over. I'm located in Central Oregon, so getting over the mountains is like it's a thing. It takes time.
Yeah, for sure.
For not getting over for your grand opening because I would love to have seen it and um, ask you a million more questions. What does this do? How does this work?
Seriously, anytime, anytime. We're very happy to show off the facility. So we don't need a big grand reopening to tour to tour the facility.
You'll get more time with us if you just come on your own.
True, true.
Yeah. Matter of fact, that's true because you probably overdue to a visit to Portland, or at least it's part of the state. Okay.
I do have a question about, I guess, sort of how it makes sense for an entrepreneur to access your services. So if I my food hub has an entrepreneur that's looking to scale, like at what point, what sort of, I guess, skill level? I don't have the right way to ask this question, but what do these guys need to know, or where do they already need to be at for it to make sense for them to interact with the pilot plant? You know, we like to give referrals, but we like to give good referrals when we can, and not get you guys in a situation where you're like, actually, you need to like look at these other resources that have nothing to do with the pilot plant because you're nowhere near what we need.
Oh,
Yeah, this is a good one. Why don't you go ahead and take it, Jessica?
oh no, uh, I mean, the truth is we do, well, maybe I can point to some examples of, I think a food entrepreneur would have needs to have some small amount of sales already or something like at a minimum be in a farmer's market. I mean, we talked to somebody early on, Zach. They were like, we have an idea. And it turns out that it was just somebody in their kitchen and they really didn't know anything about the food industry. Like they'd never been in a farmer's market. They'd never scaled it up even to like a commercial kitchen. And that was way too soon to talk to us. Ideally, if you come to us, you kind of have industrial ingredient supplier. When I say industrial, I just mean like at scale, right? I mean like at scale ingredient suppliers um, lined up, an idea of what product you want to make. I mean, we talk to people all the time that really don't even have a product. They have an idea. So, but generally like they have a product, they have some experience with sales, they have some idea about really what that is they want to do. I mean, Zach and I are very creative people. We can come up with concepts all day long, but it's not really what the service we offer is. I mean, it's like, okay,
Right.
you want to get from here to there. Yeah, we can help. I don't know if that's answering the question, but probably some
Yeah.
modest amount of food production and sales already.
Yeah. So really they have to have a recipe that is complete that they've been using and is reproducible and has been converted to a scalable recipe already. So they've gone through that effort, whether they're doing that with support from something like Food Innovation Center or if it's something that they've just done. And they're looking for something towards that next scale. I mean, you're just going to be too expensive for anything else.
That's right. Right. Yeah, like we can. Christina DeWitt, who's the director of the Astoria Seafood Lab, some of you may know her. She describes what they do is like she's like we're like a motel for co-manufacturing. Like we're kind of the same way. I mean, you might stay with us for a night, but we're not your Airbnb and we're not your house, right? It's just going to be a very tiny bit to move along to the next stage. But what we're really good at is the process development part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
And could you describe when you say process development, can you give an example of what you
yeah,
mean by that? Like, I think I have a picture of what that is, but I'm not a food
yeah.
manufacturer.
So
I'm a restaurant person.
thanks for asking about that. I'll give you a tangible one. It was a project that was for a sparkling flavored wine beverage. And the guy came to us. He's a longtime wine industry person, but he came from more on the business, the creative side, not necessarily on the technical side, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's been in the business for a while, so he knew what he wanted. He actually hired a formulator. He didn't totally have his supply chain figured out, but he generally knew what he wanted to do, but he just didn't quite know how to put it together. Well, Zach and I, Jeff Clausen, we have a lot of beverage experience. So he needed sales samples because he was looking for investment to get to the next level of what he was doing. And so he was just looking to do those samples. But along with that was a little bit of process development. So process development in that case meant how are we going to get the ingredients? How are we filtering it? How are we treating it to stabilize it so it doesn't re-ferment or change drastically once it's in storage? That kind of thing. And so all those process details, which really affect the product, um, we worked that out. We worked it out with him. So that's what I mean about process development. So you could I mean we all know you can make a great cocktail in your in your kitchen, but if you're doing that at scale and it needs to be stable, there's a lot of different steps that need to
Mm-hmm.
happen and make sure it tastes good. So that part. And
Okay,
sometimes
cool.
it is like changing ingredients or I mean there are things like that, but a lot of process work.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions from this group?
I have a question, and I have fumbly tech right now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so I have a new client at Bohemia Food Hub, and she's making like non-alcoholic mixer in a bottle, and she really wants to switch to cans, and we obviously can't serve her needs there. She's like new and about a year old, so she's got some sales. She's got her formula down. She has a slick product, nice branding, and I wonder like how to help her even just like explore the road of is like of switching to cans, and and then also like is that you guys and I think I already know the answer to this, but is there any sort of like grant funding to help somebody just explore that avenue?
So few things. Absolutely send her to us. Depending on what she needs. That's actually for us on the beverage center side, where we have a lot of capability in that area. So you can totally send her our way. Um, and there are mobile canners, by the way, Kim. So if you wanted to keep that in house, uh, there are mobile trucks that will come around and do that. So you don't even necessarily need, that's actually a pretty well-worn path for processing. So you could look at that. On the grant side, this is where I am woefully ignorant. It's really funny because we're with the university, right? So our colleagues deal a lot with grants, but funnily enough, we're not really in the entrepreneur space on the grant side. I mean, what we have is our pilot plants, and the other services we offer are really for teaching and our own projects. And it just so happens that we have excess capacity that we can make available to entrepreneurs. So having said all that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know about that. The grants for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and then thanks for those answers. I had no idea about mobile canners.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot of them.
I think I'll circle back with you for sure and connect y'all. And then I don't know if this is even answerable, but is it possible with that like model in mind to give like how much capital would she need to just explore that? Like you mentioned, getting the wine guy some sample deals for his investors. Like, is that a $5,000?
Yeah, so I would say
Yeah.
all in with ingredients and everything, I would put on my balance sheet a budget of $10,000.
Yeah.
And that's like a little bit high, but that would be, yeah. If she got 10K, she could probably have, how many cans is that, Zach? What do we think? That's 600 to 800 cans, I would say.
1,000.
1,000 cans.
Probably about 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I
Thank
would
you
count it as
so much.
Yeah, I would count it as a market. I would not look at the per can cost of that because it will make you crazy. I would make it like a marketing cost or something.
Right. Right. Exactly. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Other questions in this group? All right, you guys. Thanks, Zach and Jessica. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. It's
Thanks
been
for
super
having us.
helpful. I learned
Good
what
to
a
see you
retort
all.
is.
Woohoo!
All right. Well, we'll send out the recording. Thanks for sending over the slides, Zach. And I'll send out the recording and notes, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Yes,
Bye, Willie. Bye, everybody. Bye.